Hello, students. Welcome to the online classes once more. Do you remember where we left in our last class? Yes, you must have by now understood that the verger, that is, Albert Edward Foreman, and the new vicar are about to talk. So, students, let's move to the next paragraph. I'll be reading the paragraph followed by explanation. All this hustle, said Albert Edward, but give him time. He will learn. When the vicar had walked down the aisle so far that he could address the verger without raising his voice more than was becoming in a place of worship, he stopped. Foreman, will you come into the vestry for a minute? I have something to say to you. Very good, sir. The vicar waited for him to come up, and they walked up the chairs together. A very nice christening, I thought, sir. Funny how the baby stopped crying the moment you took him. Explanation. Students, there are some dialogues between Albert Edward Foreman and the new vicar. We must understand here that the language used by Albert Edward Foreman is a colloquial language. That means it is a spoken language or an ordinary language. So, observe it carefully. You will find that it is hustle, but H here is not shown, and the pronunciation goes asl. Again, we find it is him, HIM, but it's given here im, I am. From this, we can also conclude that Albert Edward Foreman did not have a refined language. When Foreman saw the new vicar approaching him, he said to himself, why the vicar should hustle so much. Then he consoled that as time passes, the vicar would reform himself. Students, hustle means to jostle, to be excited or remain busy. Here, we must understand that Albert Edward Foreman had in his mind the old vicar, who was very calm and quiet, and unlike him, the new vicar was quick, jostling, excited. The new vicar was approaching Albert Edward Foreman, and he stopped at a point where he felt that he won't have to raise his voice from there to talk with Foreman. And because it was a place of worship, he could also not shout. And then he told Foreman to meet him for a while in the vestry. He also informed that there was something to be discussed with him. Foreman agreed to this by saying, very good, sir. Now we find that the vicar and Albert Edward Foreman were walking together up the church. There was obviously a silence, so Albert Edward started saying about the christening that it was a nice function that day. He also remarked that the baby who was christened stopped crying as soon as the vicar took it into his arms. Students, we have to understand here that Albert Edward Foreman was trying to please the new vicar by praising his technique to stop a crying baby. You can say that Albert Edward Foreman was flattering the vicar a bit. The next paragraph. I have noticed they very often do, said the vicar with a little smile. After all, I have a good deal to practice with them. It was a source of subdued pride to him that he could nearly always quiet a whimpering infant by the manner in which he held it, and he was not unconscious of the amused admiration with which mothers and nurses watched him settle the baby in the crook of his pleased arm. The Virgin knew that it pleased him to be complimented on his talent. The vicar preceded Albert Edward into the vestry. Albert Edward was a trifle surprised to find the two churchwardens there. He had not seen them come in. They gave him pleasant nods. Explanation. Students, we find some dialects here, but the writer also comments on them. The remark of Albert Edward Foreman really pleased the new vicar, and he replied with pride that infants stopped crying as soon as he took them. The vicar also offered some reasons for this. He said that it was because of his practice for a long time which taught him how to take a baby into his arms. While taking the baby into his arms, the new vicar was also conscious of the fact that mothers and nurses nearby were watching him, and so he tried his best to take the baby in the crook of his arms in the dress of a vicar with long sleeves. Students, here surpliced means long sleeved. I suppose you understand the meaning of the word sleeve, SLEVE, long armed dress. The writer here comments that Albert Edward already knew that the vicar would be pleased to hear a compliment on his talent. But as soon as Albert Edward Foreman entered the vestry, he was surprised and a bit shocked also, because he saw there the two churchwardens whom he did not see entering it. Students, this is a very important point here. The churchwardens had been present in the vestry before the coming of Albert Edward Foreman, and Albert Edward Foreman did not see them entering the vestry. This gives a sense of a pre planning done by all the three, that is, the vicar and the church wardens. Now, in the vestry, there are four persons: Albert Edward Foreman, the new vicar, and the two church wardens. Let's see what happens next. Good afternoon, my lord. Good afternoon, sir, he said to one after the other. They were elderly men, both of them, and they had been church wardens almost as long as Albert Edward had been verger. They were sitting now at a handsome refectory table that the old vicar had brought many years before from Italy, and the new vicar sat down in the vacant chair between them. Albert Edward faced them, the table between him and them, and wondered with slight uneasiness what was the matter. He remembered still the occasion on which the organist had got in trouble and the bother they had all had to hush things up. In a church like St. Peter's, Nivelle Square, they could not afford scandal. On the vicar's red face was a look of resolute dignity, but the others bore an expression that was slightly troubled. Explanation. Albert Edward Furman wished good afternoon to the church wardens one by one. The church wardens were elderly persons and they had been working there for a long time. In fact, as long as Albert Edward Furman had been serving St. Peter's Naval Square Church. That means the church wardens had been working there nearly for 16 years. There was a comfortable sitting arrangement in the vestry. There was a refectory table brought by the old vicar from Italy. The table was in the center and some chairs were placed around it. Albert Edward was sitting alone on one side, facing all the three persons, and the refectory table was between them. Foreman felt a bit uneasy regarding the matter because now he remembered that a similar situation was there with the organist before. Students, here I must tell you the meaning of some words like refectory. Refectory table is a table in a dining room, and organists are the persons who play organs. What we in India say keyboard. In churches, choirs are sung and they are accompanied by music. So Albert Edward Furman here was a bit confused and he recalled the whole situation when an organist got into trouble in the past. The writer here remarks that St. Peter's Neville Square Church was very particular about scandals. In other words, they paid much attention to the reputation of the church. The vicar sitting there had a very resolute look on his red face, but he showed his benignity. Now, students, benignity means kindness. But the two church wardens looked a bit disturbed. This made Albert Edward think that there was something not good. The next paragraph. He's been nagging them, as said the verger to himself. He's jockeyed them into doing something, but they don't like it. That's what it is. You mark my words. Explanation. Students, I have stopped here to explain because it is important here. In this utter confusion, Albert Edward Foreman had a feeling that the church wardens were forced to do something that they did not like to do. Nagging means constantly harassing or constantly troubling. Jockeyed means forced. Now, the important thing in this dialogue is that Albert Edward Foreman tried to read the mind of the vicar and the church wardens. He could sense that something was going wrong, and the church wardens were forced to go by what the vicar wanted himself. In other words, Albert Edward Foreman tried to understand the situation of the two church wardens and did not want to blame them for anything if something would go wrong. Let's continue. But his thoughts did not appear on Albert Edward's clean cut and distinguished features. He stood in a respectful but not obsequious attitude. He had been in service before he was appointed to his ecclesiastical office, but only in very good houses, and his deportment was irreproachable. Starting as a page boy in the household of a merchant prince, he had risen by due degrees from the position of to first footman. For a year he had been single-handed butler to a widowed peeress, until the vacancy occurred at St. Peter's. Butler with two men under him in the house of a retired ambassador. He was tall, spare, grave, and dignified. He looked, if not like a duke, at least like an actor of the old school who specialized in duke's part. He had tact, firmness, and self assurance. His character was unimpeachable. Explanation. Students, by now we got to know that a string of thoughts had been going in the mind of Albert Edward Foreman. But he was clever. He tried his best not to show his emotions on his face. He looked calm and quiet with his clean cut and distinguished features. Students here, clean cut and distinguished features refer to the personality of Albert Edward Foreman. He presented himself in a respectful but not with an obsequious attitude. Students, obsequious attitude means very much obedient nature or very much attentive nature. Here, students, it is an important point to be noted. Albert Edward Foreman tried to show that he respected everyone, but he won't yield himself before others in too much respect. In other words, he was not going to lose his position for the sake of showing too much respect. The writer here comes in and gives a description of the past of Albert Edward Foreman. So let's see what it is. Albert Edward Foreman started working before he became the verger of St. Peter's, but he worked in good houses. He started as a page boy. Now, students, who is a page boy? A page boy is not exactly a servant, but a person who attends guests. So Albert Edward started as a page boy in a merchant prince's house. Working there, he got promotion to the first footman from the fourth one. That was a good sign of Albert Edward's dedication towards his service. Foreman also worked for a widowed peeress. Peeress is the wife of a peer. Peer is a rank in political system in the European countries. He also worked as a butler of a retired ambassador. Students, butler means the chief male servant. So Albert Edward worked as the chief male servant, with two other servants under him. Then finally he joined St. Peter's Naval Square Church as a verger when there was a vacancy. So this is how Albert Edward Foreman reached St. Peter's Naval Square Church. Albert Edward Foreman had a very pleasant personality. He was tall, grave, that is serious, and dignified, that is respectful, and somewhat unique and different from others. He looked like an actor, if not a duke, but specialized in acting as a duke. He was a man of character. No one could point a finger at his character. So, students, we find that Albert Edward Foreman, although was a verger, but he had a very good personality. Next paragraph. The vicar began briskly. Foreman, we have got something rather unpleasant to say to you. You have been here a great many years, and I think his lordship and the general agree with me that you have fulfilled the duties of your office to the satisfaction of everybody concerned. The two churchwardens nodded. But a most extraordinary circumstance came to my knowledge the other day, and I felt it my duty to impart it to the churchwardens. I discovered to my astonishment that you could neither read nor write. Students, we need to notice one thing. The language of the vicar also sometimes turns colloquial. A most extraordinary. It should be the most extraordinary. We do not put indefinite article before superlatives. Briskly means energetically or in an energetic way. So the vicar started in an energetic way, addressing Albert Edward Foreman. He informed him that there was an unpleasant news for Foreman, but he started by saying that Foreman had been a very responsible person in his service. He further told that no one could put a question regarding his service. Here, the churchwardens also agreed, and the vicar wanted them to agree. That was intentional in a way. Of course, that was also right. Then the vicar started saying that he was shocked the other day to know that Albert Edward Foreman could neither read nor right. Students, that was a suspense kept by the vicar. Now the vicar very clearly showed Albert Edward Foreman why he had called him to the vestry. So students, let us stop here for today. I'll be giving you a writing along with this explanation. Thank you so much for staying with me.